The power went out at exactly 2:17 a.m., and every radio in the park went dead at the same time. I remember checking my watch twice because it felt too precise to be an accident, like someone had flipped a switch on purpose. I was halfway through a routine night patrol on the Northridge Road, about 6 miles from the main station, when the headlights on my truck flickered once, and then dimmed to a weak yellow glow. The engine kept running, but everything electronic felt thinner, like it was barely holding on. I tried the radio anyway, nothing but a faint hiss. No dispatcher, no other rangers, no weather updates, just silence. That alone was enough to make me uneasy, because we had strict protocols about communication, especially at night, especially in that part of the park. I logged the outage in my notebook out of habit, even though I had no way to report it. That was the first detail that didn't sit right later, because when I checked the log back at the station, that entry wasn't there anymore. I kept driving. The road curved along a steep drop, dense forest pressing in on both sides. Normally, there were a few distant lights from the campground down below, but that night, everything was dark, completely dark. No campfires, no lanterns, no flashlights, just black. I slowed down, thinking maybe the outage hit the lower camps too. That happens sometimes, but not like this. Not all at once. About a mile further, I saw a vehicle parked on the shoulder ahead. It wasn't unusual by itself. People sometimes pull over for photos or to sleep. But this one had no lights on, no hazard flashers, and it was positioned at a slight angle, like it had rolled to a stop rather than parked deliberately. I pulled in behind it and stepped out with my flashlight. The air felt colder than it should have. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. I called out, standard procedure. No response. I circled the vehicle slowly. It was an older sedan, dusty, out-of-state plates. The driver's door was slightly open. Inside, the keys were still in the ignition, but the car was off. There was a backpack on the passenger seat, half unzipped, with a folded map sticking out. No phone, no wallet in sight. I checked the ground around the car. The dirt was soft enough to hold prints, but there was something odd about them. There were footprints leading away from the car toward the tree line, but they didn't match. One set looked like hiking boots. The other looked like dress shoes. Smooth soles, narrow heel. They overlapped in places, like two people had been walking close together. I followed them a few steps into the trees, but the beam of my flashlight didn't go far. The forest swallowed the light faster than usual. I stopped and turned back. Without radio contact, I wasn't supposed to go off trail alone at night. That's drilled into my rest. You from day one. I made a note to return at first light with backup. When I got back into my truck, I noticed the headlights were a little brighter again, but the dashboard clock was blinking 12, like it had reset. That didn't make sense because the engine had never turned off. I tried the radio again, still dead. That's when I heard the first voice. It came through the static, low and broken, like someone whispering through a fan. Unit 3, respond. I grabbed the mic immediately. This is Ranger Cole, Northridge Road. Do you copy? The voice didn't answer directly. It repeated the same phrase, slightly distorted. Unit 3, respond. We didn't have a Unit 3 assigned that night. I knew the roster by memory. I asked again, louder this time, but the transmission cut off mid-sentence. Just a sharp click, then silence. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide if it was a glitch or something else. Radio interference isn't uncommon out there, especially with the terrain, but this felt different. Too clear in parts, too deliberate. I decided to head back toward the main station. Protocol said regroup during a communication failure. As I turned the truck around, my headlights swept across the trees, and for a split second, I saw someone standing about 20 yards in. They didn't move. They didn't react to the light. Just stood there, facing the road. I hit the brakes and leaned forward, trying to get a better look. When I aimed the flashlight in that direction, there was nothing there. No movement, no sound. Just trees. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe a branch or a shadow. But it stuck with me. Things like that tend to. I started driving back, slower this time. About 5 minutes in, the truck's engine coughed once, like it was about to stall, then recovered. The headlight flickered again. I checked the fuel gauge. Full, temperature normal, no warning lights. Still, something felt off. Then the radio came back on for a second. A burst of static, then a different voice, clearer this time. "Don't return to station." I froze. "Repeat," I said into the mic. No response, just static again. That wasn't any of our standard codes or procedures. No one would say that without identifying themselves. I tried to call dispatch. Nothing. I kept driving, but slower, my eyes scanning the road ahead. About a mile from the station, I saw lights in the distance. At first I thought it was the main building's generator kicking in, but as I got closer I realized the lights were moving. Two beams, low to the ground, weaving slightly. Another vehicle. I pulled over and waited. The other vehicle approached slowly, then stopped about 30 feet in front of me. It was one of our patrol trucks. Same model, same markings. The driver's side window rolled down, but I couldn't see the driver's face clearly. It was too dark inside. "You lose comms too?" I called. "Out." The person inside nodded once. Didn't speak. That was unusual. Rangers talk. We confirm. We identify. I stepped out of my truck, keeping my flashlight low. "Which unit are you?" I asked. The person hesitated, then said, 3. My stomach tightened. "There is no Unit 3 tonight," I said. The person didn't respond. Just sat there. I took a step closer, angling the flashlight up slightly. The beam caught the edge of their face for a second. It looked wrong. Not in a dramatic way, just slightly off, like the features didn't line up the way they should. Eyes too far apart, or maybe just the angle. It's hard to explain. I stopped where I was. "I'm going to need you to step out of the vehicle," I said, keeping my voice steady. No movement. Then the engine of their truck revved suddenly, loud in the quiet, and they sped past me, heading deeper into the park. I turned and watched the taillights disappear into the darkness. For a moment, I considered following them, but without radio contact and with everything else going on, it didn't feel right. I got back into my truck and continued to the station. When I arrived, the power was still out. The building was dark, except for a single emergency light near the entrance. I went inside, calling out for the other rangers. No answer. The place felt empty. Too empty. I checked the duty board. My name was still there, along with 2 others, but next to the 3rd slot, where there should have been more than the word, had been a blank. Someone had written Unit 3 in pen. I stared at it for a while, trying to remember if it had been there earlier. I was almost sure it hadn't. I went to the radio room and tried the base station. Nothing, just the same faint hiss. Then, for a brief second, the power flickered back. Lights came on, monitors booted up, radios crackled to life. And in that moment, I heard multiple voices talking over each other, all trying to report something at once. "Vehicle abandoned. Unknown individual on ridge. Copy. Unit 3. Then the power cut out again. Silence. I stood there in the dark, the words echoing in my head. Copy Unit 3. We didn't have a Unit 3. At least, we weren't supposed to. I checked the incident logs on the computer once the generator finally kicked in, about 20 minutes later. There were entries time-stamped during the outage. Reports from units I recognized. And one from Unit 3. It described an encounter with another Ranger vehicle behaving erratically. The location matched where I had seen the truck. The report ended abruptly, mid-sentence. No follow-up. No closure. I went back to my notebook to compare my own notes. The entry about the power outage at 2:17 a.m. was gone. The page was still there, but that line had been erased cleanly, like it had never been written. The indentation was still faintly visible into the light. That's the part that bothers me the most, because I know I wrote it. I always log outages. It's procedure. And yet, it wasn't in the official record anymore. The next morning, we sent a team back to the abandoned sedan. It was still there, exactly where I left it. The footprints were gone, completely gone, like the ground had been smoothed over. No sign of anyone in the surrounding area, no reports of missing persons matching the vehicle. It was eventually towed and impounded. No one ever claimed it. As for the other patrol truck, the one driven by Unit 3, it was never logged as leaving the station that night. All our vehicles were accounted for. No damage, no extra mileage, nothing out of place. I brought it up during the debrief, but it was written off as a misidentification under stress. Radio interference, low visibility, fatigue. Standard explanations. But I know what I saw, and more importantly, I know what I heard. That voice on the radio, telling me not to return to the station, and then the other voice later, claiming to be Unit 3. Those weren't glitches, they were deliberate. And the fact that similar reports have come in since then, quietly, off the record, from other rangers on night patrols, makes it harder to ignore. We don't talk about it officially, but it comes up in conversations sometimes, usually late at night, when the radios crackle a little longer than they should. The power outage was never fully explained. The report just says temporary grid failure, which doesn't account for the timing or the scope. It also doesn't explain why every radio in the park picked up the same unidentified transmission at the exact same moment. Or why the duty board had a unit listed that didn't exist. I still patrol that same road occasionally. It's part of my route, and every time I pass the spot where the sedan was, I slow down a little, out of habit. I look toward the tree line, half expecting to see someone standing there again. I haven't, so far. But last week, doing another late shift, the radio cut out for a few seconds. Just static. Then, very clearly, I heard a voice say, Unit 3, status. No one responded. I didn't either. I just kept riding, eyes on the road, waiting for the signal to come back. And when it did, everything sounded normal again. Dispatch, weather updates, routine chatter. Like nothing had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, just beyond the range of our lights and our radios, waiting for another moment when the power goes out and no one can hear you call for help. The emergency call came from inside a locked ranger station that had been closed for 3 years. I was on night patrol near the southern boundary when dispatch patched it through, and the first thing I noticed was the timestamp. It was coming through our system as a live call, but the originating line had been disconnected years ago. The voice on the other end was low, shaky, and kept repeating the same sentence. I'm at the station. I can't get out. Then the line cut. Dispatch tried to trace it, but the system just flagged it as Station 12, which didn't make sense, because Station 12 had been abandoned after a structural issue back in 2022. I remember asking dispatch if anyone had reactivated that line recently. They said no. No maintenance, no power, nothing. It should have been completely dead. Still, protocol says you respond to distress calls, no matter how strange they are. So I turned my truck around and headed toward Station 12. It was about 20 minutes out, down a service road we didn't use much anymore. The weather had been dry for weeks, so the road was dusty and uneven, and my headlights kicked up a low cloud behind me as I drove. About halfway there, my radio started picking up interference. Not static exactly, more like overlapping voices, too faint to make out. I tried calling dispatch again, but my transmission didn't go through. The signal meter dropped to 0, which was odd, because that area usually had decent coverage. I kept going, anyway. The closer I got to the station, the darker it felt. Not just the usual night darkness, but a kind of heavy quiet. No insects, no wind through the trees, nothing. When Station 12 finally came into view, it looked exactly like I remembered. Boarded windows, faded signage, the main door chained shut. There were no lights on, which was expected, but what wasn't expected was the fresh set of tire tracks leading up to it. They were recent. The dust hadn't settled yet. I parked a few yards away and stepped out, scanning the area with my flashlight. The air smelled faintly like something burnt, but I couldn't place it. I called out, identifying myself, asking if anyone was inside. No response. I walked up to the front door and checked the chain. It was still locked, rusted in place. The padlock hadn't been touched in years, at least not visibly. I moved around to the side of the building, where there was an old service entrance. That door was also shut, but not chained, just a standard handle. I tried it. It opened with a creak that sounded too loud in the silence. Inside, the station was exactly how it had been left, dust covering everything, old equipment pushed against the walls, paperwork scattered across desks. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching particles in the air. "Ranger Cole," I called out again. "If anyone's here, respond." Moment. There was nothing. Then I heard it. A faint shuffling sound, deeper inside the building. I moved toward it slowly, my hand resting near my sidearm, just in case. The hallway led to the old office area, where the radios and logs used to be kept. The door to that room was closed. I stopped in front of it and listened. The shuffling sound was coming from inside. "I'm opening the door," I said, loud enough to be heard. No reply. I pushed it open. The room was empty, completely empty. The desks were there, the chairs, the old radio console, but no person. The sound had stopped the second I opened the door. I stepped inside, sweeping the flashlight across the room. That's when I noticed the logbook on the main desk. It was open. That didn't make sense. The last time anyone had been here, everything had been packed away. I walked over and looked at it. The pages were yellowed, but one entry stood out. It was fresh, written in dark ink that hadn't faded. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. It read, "Still here. Door won't open. Someone outside." There was no date, no time, just that line. I felt a tightness in my chest as I read it. I flicked back a few pages. The previous entries were from years ago, routine logs from when the station was still active. Nothing unusual. I tried the radio console out of habit, even though I knew it shouldn't work. The power had been cut off years ago. But when I pressed the transmit button, I heard a click, then static. Low, steady. I froze for a second, then spoke into the mic. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Cole at Station 12, do you copy?" The static shifted slightly, like something adjusting on the other end. Then a voice came through. Not dispatch. The same voice from the call. "You came back." I felt my grip tighten on the mic. "Where are you?" I asked. "In the station," the voice said. "I've been here." I turned slowly, scanning the room again. Still empty. "I don't see you," I said. There was a pause. Then the voice replied, quieter this time. "You didn't last time either." That didn't make sense. I had never been here before, not since it was closed. "When did you call for help?" I asked. No answer, just breathing on the line. Then the radio cut out completely. Dead silence. I set the mic down and stepped back, trying to make sense of what I just heard. That's when I noticed something else. The dust on the floor. There were footprints, fresh ones, leading from the door to the desk, and then stopping. No return prints. No sign of where the person had gone. Just a single path that ended in the middle of the room. I crouched down and looked closer. The prints were consistent. Same size, same pattern. But there was something off about them. The spacing was uneven, like the person had been limping or dragging a foot. I followed the line back toward the door. But it only went one way. In, not out. I stood up quickly, a sudden unease settling in. I decided it was time to leave and call for backup from the better signal area. As I turned to go, I heard the shuffling sound again. This time, it was coming from behind me. I spun around, flashlight raised. Nothing. Just the same empty room, but the sound didn't stop. It moved, slowly, across the floor, like something pacing just out of sight. I backed toward the door, keeping the light moving. "If someone's here, you need to show yourself," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The sound paused. Then, from somewhere close, too close, I heard a whisper. Not through the radio this time. In the room. "Don't leave. I didn't wait for anything else. I stepped out into the hallway and moved quickly toward the exit. As I reached the main door, I heard it slam shut behind me, hard. The sound echoed through the building. I turned back, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. No movement, no shadows, just darkness. I pushed through the service doors, stepped outside, the cool night air hitting me like a reset. I walked straight to my truck, not looking back. As I got in, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Another set of tire tracks, parked beside mine, fresh. I scanned the area with my flashlight, but there was no vehicle, no engine noise, nothing. Just the tracks. I got in and started the engine. The river. Headlights cutting through the darkness. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw movement in one of the boarded windows, like someone standing just behind it. But when I looked again, it was gone. I drove until I got signal back and reported everything to dispatch. They sent a team out the next morning. They found the station exactly as I described it. The logbook was on the desk, but the fresh entry was gone. The page was blank. No ink, no indentation, nothing. The footprints were gone too. Completely undisturbed dust. No sign of entry. No sign of anyone being there recently. They checked the phone lines. Still disconnected. No record of any outgoing call. The official report listed it as a false alarm, likely caused by a system glitch. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. What bothers me most isn't the voice of the footprints. It's that line in the logbook. Someone outside. Because if that entry was real, even for a moment, then whoever wrote it wasn't afraid of being trapped inside. They were afraid of something waiting just outside the station. And the only person out there that night was me. The trail markers were moved overnight, and they led straight into a restricted zone that didn't exist on any official map. I noticed it about an hour into my night patrol, just after midnight, while checking the East Canyon Loop. That trail had been stable for years, clearly marked, regularly maintained, nothing complicated. But that night, marker 14 was gone, and marker 15 was pointing in the wrong direction. At first I thought it was vandalism. Happens sometimes. People think it's funny to mess with signage. But then I saw marker 16, and it was worse. It had been pulled out of the ground and reinstalled about 20 feet off the actual trail, angled toward a narrow path that shouldn't have been there. I stopped my truck and got out, shining my flashlight along the ground. The original trail was still visible, worn and compacted. But this new path, if you could call it that, looked freshly disturbed. Loose soil, broken branches, and a faint line of footprints heading inward. I crouched down and checked them. They were recent, maybe a few hours old. One set, maybe two. Hard to tell in the dirt. I radioed dispatch to report the tampering, but all I got was a burst of static. I tried again. Same result. That was the first time I realized something was off with the comms. Not completely dead, just unreliable. Like something was interfering selectively. I logged the coordinates in my notebook and marked the time, 12:43 a.m. Then I stood there for a moment, deciding whether to follow the altered markers or stick to the original trail. Protocol says you don't deviate alone at night, especially into unverified terrain. But if someone had gone in there, intentionally or not, I needed to assess it. I grabbed my secondary flashlight, checked my sidearm, and started down the false path. The terrain changed almost immediately. The ground dipped slightly, and the trees grew closer together, blocking out what little moonlight there was. The air felt heavier, like the humidity had spiked, even though the forecast said it should be dry. I kept one hand on my radio, trying to get a signal as I walked, but it stayed quiet. No static, no chatter, nothing. Just dead. About 50 yards in, I found another marker. It wasn't part of the official set. Different material, different numbering. It just had a single symbol carved into it. 3 vertical lines, evenly spaced. No paint, no reflective coating, just carved wood. I'd never seen anything like it in the park. I took a photo with my phone, but the screen glitched for a second before capturing the image. The picture came out darker than it should have, like the exposure had dropped. I moved on, more alert now. Every few steps I'd stop and listen. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No insects, no wind, no distant animal calls. Just the sound of my own boots on the ground. Then I heard something ahead. A faint metallic clink, like something tapping against a rock. I froze and turned off my flashlight for a second, letting my eyes adjust. The darkness was complete. No ambient light at all. I turned the flashlight back on and moved forward slowly. The path narrowed further, almost like a corridor. The trees on either side leaned inward, their branches forming a kind of tunnel. That's when I saw the fence. It was old, rusted chain link, about 6 feet high, running perpendicular to the path. There was a gate in the center, slightly ajar. No signage, no warnings, nothing to indicate it was a restricted area, but it clearly was. I checked my map. Nothing. No fence, no gate, no boundary listed in that section of the park. I stepped closer and examined the gate. The hinges were worn, but recently disturbed. The dirt around it showed fresh scuff marks, like it had been opened and closed multiple times. I pushed it open a bit more, and it creaked loudly. The sound echoed in a way that didn't feel natural, like it carried too far. On the other side, the ground looked different. Flattened, almost compacted, like it had been used regularly. There were more footprints, clearer this time. Multiple sets, all heading inward. None coming back. I hesitated. This was well beyond standard patrol territory. I should have turned back and reported it during daylight with a team. But something about the setup, the moved markers, the deliberate path, the lack of signage, felt intentional. Like someone wanted people to go in there. I stepped through the gate. The air changed again, cooler this time. And there was a smell, faint but distinct, like damp metal. I followed the path, keeping my flashlight low. About 30 yards in, I saw the first object, a camping chair, folded and leaning against a tree. It was clean, no dust, no signs of long-term exposure, recently placed. Next to it was a small pile of empty water bottles, all the same brand, labels removed. That was unusual. Most people leave mixed trash, not uniform items like that. I scanned the area. No tent, no fire pit, no personal belongings beyond that. Just a chair and the bottles. I took another photo. This time the camera froze completely for a second before saving. The image looked normal, but something about the lighting felt off. I couldn't explain it. I kept moving. The path curved slightly to the right, and that's when I heard voices. Low, indistinct, coming from further ahead. I stopped and listened. It sounded like two people talking, but I couldn't make out the words. I called out, identifying myself as a ranger. The voices stopped immediately. No response. I moved forward, more cautiously now. My hand was back near my sidearm. The path opened into a small clearing, maybe 20 feet across. In the center, there was a structure, not a building, exactly. More like a frame made of metal poles, arranged in a rough cube shape, about 8 feet tall. No walls, no roof, just the frame, and inside it, hanging from the top bar, was a portable radio unit. One of ours. Standard issue. I recognized the model immediately. It was powered on. The speaker was emitting a low hum. I approached slowly, scanning the perimeter. No one in sight. No movement. I stepped into the frame and reached for the radio. As soon as I touched it, the hum shifted into a clear transmission. Unit 3, status. I pulled my hand back instinctively. The voice was the same one I'd heard before, during a previous incident. Calm, neutral, but unfamiliar. "This is Ranger Cole," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Identify yourself." No response, just the hum again. Then, faintly, from somewhere behind me, I heard a twig snap. I turned quickly, flashlight sweeping the edge of the clearing. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing just beyond the tree line, still watching. But when the light hit that spot, there was nothing there. I backed out of the frame, keeping the radio in view. That's when I noticed something else. On the ground, just outside the structure, there was a line scratched into the dirt. A boundary, and on the other side of that line, closer to the trees, there were more of those carved markers with the 3 vertical lines, placed in a rough circle around the clearing. I hadn't seen them when I walked in. I was sure of that. I took a step back, then another. The air felt tighter now, like the space was closing in. I turned and started back toward the gate, moving faster this time. As I did, the radio behind me crackled again, louder now. "Do not leave the zone." I didn't stop. I didn't respond. I just kept moving. The path seemed longer on the way out. The turns didn't match what I remembered. At one point I hit a dead end, just dense brush where the trail should have continued. I turned around, disoriented for a second, then found another opening to the left. It hadn't been there before. I took it, hoping it would lead back to the gate. After a few minutes, I saw the fence again. Relief hit me hard. I pushed through the gate and stepped back onto the original trail. The air shifted immediately, warmer, lighter, normal. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. As I got in, I checked the time, 3:12 a.m. That didn't make sense. I'd only been in there for maybe 30 minutes. I tried the radio again. This time, it worked. Clear signal. Dispatch responded immediately. I reported the altered markers, the fence, the structure, everything. They sent a team out at first light. I went back with them. We followed the East Canyon loop to marker 14. It was in place. So was 15, 16 too. All exactly where they should have been. No signs of tampering, no alternate path. No footprints, no fence, no gate. We searched the surrounding area for hours. Nothing. No clearing, no structure, no chair, no bottles. Just untouched forest. They checked my photos. The one of the carved marker was there, but the symbol was gone. Just a blank piece of wood. The photo of the chair and bottles was corrupted. Half the image was black. The rest was just noise. The report listed it as a navigational error, possibly caused by fatigue and poor visibility. Standard explanation. But I know that trail. I've walked it dozens of times. I don't get lost out there. What stays with me isn't just what I saw, it's what I heard. That voice, again, asking for Unit 3. And the fact that it came from one of our radios, in a place that doesn't officially exist. Since then, I've been checking the trail markers more often, just in case. And last night, during a routine patrol, I passed marker 16 again. It looked normal at first, but as I drove by, my headlights caught something on the side I almost missed. 3 vertical lines, carved faintly into the wood, just below the number, like they'd been added recently. I just kept driving, watching it in the rearview mirror until it disappeared, trying not to think about where that false path might lead now, or who might be moving the markers. When no one's around,